Are you interested in discovering the spiritual and theological mysteries of the Old Testament, as well as exploring the current historical and archaeological evidence that supports or confounds the biblical narrative? If so, prepare to have your eyes opened as we journey to Damascus. Hello, and welcome to St. James's Journey to Damascus. We are shooting video today from the St. James Alexander City Studios here at Lake Martin. We're pleased to bring you these videos as a part of our Sunday school process during this time when we are not meeting together here at the church to do Sunday school. We have been working our way through the Old Testament. We just finished up with 2 Samuel. We started with just the first couple of chapters of 1 Kings last video. So that's where we pick up today. 1 Kings chapter 3. I said last week that I'd give you a little overview of Kings this week since I hadn't gotten to that last week. So let me just kind of tell you a little bit about the book of 1 Kings. Actually, just like 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings were originally written as one book, just called Kings. The original Hebrew Bible, Kings, was written on two different scrolls. So those that developed our Bible since then, starting with the Septuagint, taking the Hebrew scrolls into Latin, divided the chapter, the book of Kings into two, 1st and 2nd, based on the one scroll and the other second scroll from the Hebrew Bible of the book Kings. Hope that's clear. I made that clear enough. And since that time of the interpretation of the scrolls into the Septuagint, all biblical scholars from that time forward went ahead and kept the books designated as 1 Kings and 2 Kings. As we read the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, we will be reading through a history of the people of Israel for some 400 years. The book starts off with the death of David and the rise of his son Solomon to be the next king of the united monarchy of Israel. And some 400 years later, we will wrap up this book as, King Ahaziah finishes out our 1 Kings episodes. Solomon reigned from about the year 970 BC to 931 BC. We have some corroborating evidence from records from surrounding countries about that reign. This book, as I said, is going to take us right up until the Babylonian invasion of Judah and Jerusalem in 587 BC. The book is a theological and historical interpretation of the monarchy of the kings of both the united Israel as well as the divided monarchy of Judah and Israel. We will find that these books, like most all of the books in our Old Testament, are written with a skew towards the people of Judah and the city of Jerusalem. As the country goes into a split, as the nation splits up, the writers of the Old Testament stories, pretty much all, with some exception, come from Jerusalem and the people of Judah. So they generally see Judah and Jerusalem as kind of the good guys, and the rest of the Israelites, if you will, as a little bit more of the evil or the bad people who don't do those things which God had commanded them to do. Although, if we're being fair, we will find that the kings of Judah, starting with Solomon, even with David, were as guilty of not doing the things God commanded, as were the kings of Israel at a later date. Let's see. The book of 1 Kings can be divided into three main sections. First one would be the reign of Solomon. The second is all about the divided monarchy and the kingship as that happens in the split. And then the last part is basically about just the kingdom of Judah. Besides reading all about the days of King Solomon, we are also introduced to Rehoboam and Jeroboam, the sons of Solomon, who will each be respective kings of Judah and Israel as the kingdom nation splits up. Solomon's name means friend of God. And as we will find, Solomon's reign is a reign of peace and friendship with God, just as his name describes. So let's get started, moving into the third chapter of 1 Kings. After dispatching his rivals and taking care of some unfinished business of revenge for his late father David, Solomon, who I said means, his name meaning friend of God, makes a politically prudent move by marrying one of the daughters of the Pharaoh of Egypt, as you can see here. This was to secure Israel's southern border in a peace treaty with the powerful nation of Egypt, which historians say at this time was not as powerful as it had been in the past, which is possibly why they were willing to make a treaty arrangement with the people of Israel, with Solomon. His wife was the daughter of Pharaoh, which was a kind of an unusual thing. Daughters of pharaohs rarely, if ever, married into families and kings of other countries. Marrying a foreign woman allowed this alliance to take place and for Israel to remain safe and peaceful throughout all the years of Solomon's reign. Solomon regularly gave sacrifices at Gibeon, because at this time we're told that the people, including Solomon, all gave sacrifices at their local places of worship. There was no real centralized worship situation in Israel at this point in time. So Solomon, one evening, goes to sleep and he has a dream. It is known as Solomon's dream, in which Solomon and God, Solomon has a conversation with God in his dream, and God asks Solomon what he would wish, what he would have from him. And Solomon says to God that he did not want long life, he does not want riches. What he really truly wants is he feels he's kind of a young man for his job as king, and what he really wants is for God to give him a wise heart to make good decisions so that he can be a good leader of the people of Israel. Well, God appreciates that request from Solomon and likes his answer so much that God decides to give him not only a very wise and understanding heart, which we're told is the wisest man in all the world and the wisest man that would ever be born in the world. And because God is so pleased with Solomon's request, he also tells Solomon he's going to give him the other things he didn't ask for. Long life, great wealth, prosperity, peace in the nation. All of that is going to come to Solomon and his people if Solomon will just continue to follow the commandments and the treaties and the requests, the laws of God as set forth to him through his father David. So Solomon assures God he will do that. When he wakes, he returns to Jerusalem. At the time he had been, as I said, doing sacrifices at Gibeon. And he returns to Jerusalem and stands before the ark and makes sacrifices at the ark and holds a great banquet, calls all of his officials to come and greet and be with him to celebrate the good fortune that God has told him Israel will have over and during his reign. Then we're told sometime later, in one of the most famous stories about Solomon, two women come to Solomon with an argument with each other. And we're told that the one woman claims that these two women live together alone in the house, and they both bore children, two boys, and that this woman tells Solomon that the other woman was sleeping in her bed with her son, and during the night accidentally rolled over on him, suffocated him, and he died. And that she then woke up in the morning, found him dead, brought the dead child into her room, took her live child from her while she was asleep, and put the dead child into her bed with her, and then returned to her room with the live child. When this woman woke up, she said that she noticed, she started looking at the child and realized it was dead and was grieving, and got to looking at the child more and realized this was not her son. And then she went to see the other woman and realized that she had taken her son, and exactly in her mind what had taken place. Well, the second woman said that this wasn't true at all, that the boy was her, but the live child was her child, and that this other woman was the one who had accidentally killed her son and had made this whole thing up so that she could have this other child. Well, Solomon listens to this story from the two women, and he thinks to himself, let me see if I've got this whole story straight. So both of you claim the child is yours. And the other one says, and you each say the dead one is not yours. So he commands, bring me a sword. So they bring Solomon a sword, and he grabs up or commands that the live child be cut in half with the sword so that each woman can have half of the boy. Well, one of the women screams, no, Lord, no, don't do this, don't kill the child, let the other woman, let her have the boy. And the other woman says, well, no, or go ahead and cut him in half, and then neither one of us will have a child. And I'm fine with that. And Solomon tells them, give the boy to the woman who wanted the child to live, for truly the boy is her child. Well, news of this wise decision circulated around the land, and all the people agreed that Solomon was the wisest man that ever lived. His fame grew throughout the region, and we're told people from other countries, other nations, other city-states used to come to Jerusalem just to be able to sit in the same room with Solomon to hear the wise things that he had to say and the decisions he made in court and all of the smart things that he knew. We are told that Solomon knew all kinds of things, that God gave him all kinds of knowledge about animals and fish and birds and horticulture and all kinds of things, and all the world in that region knew that Solomon was just the wisest man ever. We're given a list as we get into chapter 4 of all the officers of Solomon's court, and how there were 12 districts, I assume one for each tribe, and that each district was responsible for feeding Solomon's household for 1 month of the year. Now, that may not sound like a real big deal, but we are also told that the requirements, the daily requirements for the food for Solomon's house was approximately 7,500 pounds of flour, 15,000 pounds of meal, 10 oxen, 20 cattle, 100 sheep or goats, as well as deer, gazelles, and choice poultry. Solomon's household was obviously not just he and his wife or wives and their children. It included all of his relations, all of his family, far and wide, the extended family, all of their servants, all the servants' families. We're not told how many people it was, but obviously you can tell by the amount of food that they took in daily, it was quite a hoard. Then we're told about Solomon's wealth. We're told he had 4,000 horse stalls for his chariot horses and 12,000 horses in all. He had great understanding, great knowledge, wiser than everyone. Solomon, we're told, composed over 3,000 proverbs and over 1,000 songs. It's thought by some that Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs in the Bible. That is disputed by others, but it's a possibility, and it is an assumption made by some. Now, archaeologists argue, as they often do, over the extent of Solomon's kingdom, but unfortunately, there's really very little evidence that exists. However, we do have one little interesting piece. What you see here is called the ivory pomegranate. Interesting story surrounding this little bit of, this little tiny piece about the size of my thumb that was found. Interestingly, it was found by the archaeologist André Lemar, but not in an archaeological site he was working, but he found it in an antiquities market. Now, normally in the circles of archaeology, if something isn't seen and dug up out of the ground, then it is considered 99.9% that it's going to be a fake. Unless you pull it out of the ground with witnesses, nobody wants to even begin to accept that this would be real. But in 1979, Andre found this, saw this in an antiquities market, examined it a little bit, left it behind, got to thinking about it some more, went back to the antiquities market, and it was gone. Well, it stayed missing for years. Then suddenly, a Frenchman came forward and offered it to the museum, the Hebrew Museum of Jerusalem, who ended up decided that it was a authentic relic, and they paid over $500,000 for this piece. The interesting thing about it is it's got a small hole on the bottom that indicates that it was the tip of a scepter, and there's an inscription around the top of it that has led to much argument because of the fact there's a crack, and does the writing go through the crack or not? Anyways, a lot of question about whether it was authentic or not, but many archaeologists, people who have studied this thing under a microscope, believe it to absolutely be authentic. And the inscription on it says, "Holy or sacred to the priest of the house of God," spelled Yahweh. All this written in Hebrew. It's thought that it adorned a scepter of the high priest of the Holy of Holies in the Temple of Solomon. I'm going to talk about the temple at great extent in just a little bit. But this is still a controversial piece after all these years. Most archaeologists agree that this is an authentic piece that might establish the fact that there was a temple in Jerusalem of grand scope that was built by Solomon. Other archaeologists dispute it, but there you are. There's both sides of it. Moving on to the 5th chapter. Now, King Hiram of Tyre had always been, we're told, a loyal friend of David's. You remember, King Hiram was the one who offered to David all the cedar and the beams he needed to build his palace in the city of David. Well, Solomon contacts King Hiram in the land of Tyre, the city-state of Tyre, which is up the coast from Israel, and tells him, "I'd like to build a temple to God. You were always a good friend to my fathers. Will you help me with supplying me with the timbers I need to build a great temple to God?" To which King Hiram says he would be happy to do it. They make an arrangement. He says he would like to be paid in food for his people, as according to the Bible, Israel is flourishing at this point in time, particularly in farming, and is a regional superpower, if you will. A little digress for just a second here. Part of the reason for that, I believe, which some scholars believe as well, some argue against, is that Israel was located at this time in a very central location of merchant trade, that the land routes to the Mediterranean from the east, from India and the east, led right to the coastline of Israel and Tyre, and that Solomon taxed all of the goods as they came into his country. He taxed all the goods as they left the country, and that it was a thriving center of trade for the entire Mediterranean basin. So that would explain the great wealth and that Solomon was able to develop, and the prosperity that Israel had during this time. Hiram, we're told, has his people cut up the timbers that Solomon needs, and they use the timbers to build great rafts, and they float these rafts down the coastline to where the Israelites then can bring them into shore and take them apart and carry them over land to Jerusalem to build Solomon's temple. The king sent Solomon all the timber he requested, and Solomon gave King Hiram 100,000 bushels of wheat, which would be some 5 million pounds, and 110,000 gallons of olive oil. King Solomon and King Hiram then formed a formal alliance of peace, and Solomon conscripted a labor force of 30,000 woodworkers, 70,000 common laborers, 80,000 quarry workers, and 3,600 foremen to supervise the construction of the temple. Oh, we're zipping right along. Let me go. Okay, so into chapter 6. We're told it's in the mid-spring of Solomon's 4th year as king that he began the construction of the temple, some 480 years after the Hebrew people came out of Egypt. This wood carving here, it's a print from a wood carving. It depicts Solomon supervising the work of the temple. The temple, we're told, was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet tall, with an entry room 30 feet wide and 15 feet forward from the temple. The temple had narrow recessed windows and a complex of rooms all around the outer wall that went 3 stories tall. Let's see, the rooms of the complex cantilevered out on each level from 7.5 feet to 9 feet to 10.5 feet. All stonework was, interestingly, they say, completed at the quarry, that the wood was hewn. All the parts for the temple were made away from the site and brought and assembled at the site, specifically so the sound of hammers and axes would not be heard at the sacred temple location. The entrance was put at the south side with stairs winding up to the 3 various levels, we're told. Then the Bible goes into a very detailed description of what the temple looked like, both inside and out. While I'm talking, there'll be some pictures come up behind me of what various artists have come up with based on the biblical description. The ceiling was made of cedar timbers and cedar planks. Then the Lord said to Solomon, "Concerning the temple you are building, if you keep all my decrees and regulations and obey all my commands, I will fulfill my promise to your father David, and I will live among the Israelites and never abandon my people Israel. As for the interior finishes of the temple, all the interior were paneled in wood, cedar on the walls and the ceilings, cypress on the floors. We're told that there were then images carved in the woodwork of gourds and open flowers and palm trees. And then all of the walls, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. The inner sanctuary, the most holy place, was 60 feet long within this, and the inner sanctuary where the ark would be placed was 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, 30 feet tall. All of the temple walls, as well as the altar, which was made of cedar, were overlaid in pure gold. There was also gold chains protecting the entrance to the most holy place. Then we're told Solomon had 2 large cherubim made of olive wood, each of them 15 feet tall with a 15-foot wingspan. So in that 30 by 30 room, they would have been set up so that the wings of one reached from one side of the room to the center of the room, and the wings of the next one went from the center of the room to the next wall over. Cherubim, like I said, 15 foot tall, 15-foot wingspan, placed them side by side in the sanctuary and overlaid them with gold as well. The walls he then decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. Then he had them overlay the floors of both the inner room and the outer rooms in pure gold. Then we're told the inner sanctuary had double doors at its entrance, made of olive wood, with 5-sided doorposts. I do want to say this whole thing about 5-sided doorposts confused archaeologists for years and years and years. I didn't put a picture up of what it means right now, but they finally figured out that a 5-sided doorpost was like a door jamb, and a big door jamb with a smaller 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 door jamb, all interconnected, which gave them incredible strength. And then the door was laid in behind that. It was a very strong way of manufacturing or building a door jamb. Often they were built 4-sided. I imagine that seems kind of odd to us now, but that was most likely to keep anybody from being able to dig under the doorway. The door had the strong wood put on all 4 sides. The doors were carved as the walls, with the cherubims and flowers and gourds and palm trees, and overlaid in pure gold. The main temple entrance had 4-sided doorposts with 2 folding doors. Think of what we would call today bifold doors. It says folding doors that folded against themselves. Which must have been quite the thing back then, like an engineering feat. Also carved with and overlaid in gold. And we're told the temple took 7 years to complete. This brings us back to the picture that we started with. You can see in this picture, this is what the location of what is believed to be Solomon's temple in Jerusalem today. You can see in the background the Dome of the Rock Mosque, which has been built many, many years later, as well as there was a Byzantine church many, many years later. But right in the middle part of this photograph here, it's a little hard to see, but there's a large continuous wall with huge square hewn stones making it up. And it's believed by archaeologists that this is indeed the lower wall, foundation and lower wall of Solomon's temple. Not to say there isn't some argument about that, because there is, but many leading archaeologists do believe this to be the wall of the temple. It is also, you've heard of the Wailing Wall. It is a location where Jews hold sacred and will offer their prayers up, sometimes a little rolled up pieces of paper they stuck between the cracks, and this is the holiest place for Jews and Christians alike in all of Jerusalem. These stones are extremely large, cut very, very well, fitted together very closely, and if they are indeed the walls of the first temple, then that construction work would be some 3,000 years old. So, that brings us to the end of the 6th chapter of 1 Kings. Really enjoying having you all here. Been great to show you some of these pictures. Some of them are just obviously paintings and woodcuts from artists throughout the ages. Some of them I try to give you a little bit more of some modern archaeological finds and information about that. I hope you find this interesting as I do. Look forward to our next one as we move further into Kings. Solomon has many more stories. I'm pretty sure we're going to run across a dignitary from somewhere in Africa. A little spoiler alert there in our next story. So if you'd like to read ahead, we'll probably get through chapters maybe 7 through 11 or 12. So you might want to check those out before the next video. So glad you'd be with us today. I look forward to being with you again next week as we move forward in our journey in 1 Kings and on our St. James journey to Damascus. We hope you have enjoyed our discoveries for today. Please join us next time as we explore the insights of the Old Testament on the journey to Damascus.